And stepping out of the environment and doing the self-development work, what became crystal clear to me was that the pressure that I was feeling wasn't really coming from the role. It was the pressure that I was putting on myself in the way that I measured success, in the way that I was thinking, in the way that I was showing up for myself.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of The Greatest Comeback, a podcast that explores the transformative power of adversity and how it can be the catalyst for our growth, healing, and becoming the greatest goddamn versions of ourselves. I first met today's guest 20 years ago when we worked together at Dell. I'd been there for a few years when he joined. In fact, we sat next to each other, part of the same inside sales team, on the phones, hustling, prospecting, selling, learning our craft. It was clear from the start that this was a driven guy. He was an expat, recently arrived from the UK, and he was here to make money and succeed in a new country. I remember, if I'm honest, feeling a little threatened when he arrived. Where I was, certainly at the time, more of a fly by the seat of my pants and let's just hit the phones type of guy, he was someone who was structured, consistent, disciplined, and hungry. Critical elements for any salesperson. We both left Dell and went on to have long sales careers, 20 plus years, both of us always remaining connected, always in each other's lives. Now, last year we spoke on the phone. He told me he was taking a career break, some time to regroup and refresh and figure out what he wanted to do next. But in the meantime, he was going to do some work on himself and had an interest in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I'd heard of but knew nothing about. I thought nothing more about our conversation until one day, during my morning scroll, I noticed on LinkedIn that he had updated his profile. He was now a resilience coach, an NLP practitioner, helping people avoid and overcome burnout. I thought, hang on, this is not the guy I know. And I was struck by the question, what makes a highly driven, highly successful sales guy leave the comfort and security of technology sales, a career that has provided him and his family a very comfortable lifestyle, and go all in on coaching and helping other people? Well, he's here today to tell us why. Gavin Smithen, welcome to The Greatest Comeback.
Nice to be here, Luke. Thanks for the invite.
Great to have you, man. How did it feel changing your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, there's a reality around that, right? What I would say is that for me, the rumination around that happened over a number of months, and so by the time I was actually ready to wake up one day and process the update, the decision was clear, and I was very connected to the sense of direction that I was taking. But yeah, there was some, I would say there was some sort of mental gymnastics along the way there, right? Where, because for many, many years, as you say, I mean, we've known each other 20 plus, and, I was 24 years in tech sales, or 96 quarters, as we like to measure our life by. So by the time it came to actually announce publicly that I was taking a very different path, which to me has got a strong sense of connection to where I've come from. And in many ways, that's what the 24 years I felt were leading me towards. Certainly that's the sense I get now. But yeah, actually announcing that to the world was, I still remember the day.
A big deal. Yeah. The reason I asked that question is because so do I. Because when I made the decision to do something different, I think a big part of that was having the courage to actually change my LinkedIn profile. I know that sounds funny, but the implication of doing that is that I was no longer going to show up in a recruiter's search criteria, right? And in many ways that was akin to burning the boats. And I had a friend of mine that encouraged me. I was half-minded to want to kind of leave the anchor out a little bit to see, just in case. And I asked him about what I should do in terms of my LinkedIn profile, and he said, no, you've got to go all in. If you believe in what you're doing, you've got to go all in. So that was the context that I had in my head when I saw that you'd updated your LinkedIn profile, and I asked that question knowing that it was a big deal for me, so it must have been a really big deal for you too. Yeah,
sure. And it can be, it's an identity thing. I've had that conversation with other people, and the question is, well, what do I want to be known as? What do I call myself? How does that land with other people that have known me for so many years in a different capacity or in a different job title, etc.? So it's not a quick or an easy process for many people to go through.
Big time.
Right? So
Yeah. And the downstream question that I had for myself was, what will people think?
yeah, sure.
You know,
Sure.
so there are so many things at play.
Yeah.
Mate, you mentioned 96 quarters.
Yeah.
That's a lot of quarters. For those people listening or watching that have no experience in sales or technology sales for that matter, can you describe that world? Obviously you have ups and downs, you have good moments, you have bad moments, like any career, right? Yeah. But give people a flavour for the dynamics that are at play within an environment where there are high expectations of people, big reward, but there's risk as well. Can you give us a flavour of those 96 quarters and how you experience them?
I mean, look, the first thing I'd say is I'm very grateful for everything that time in tech afforded me. I made some, wonderful connections and friendships and good memories along the way, and proud of what we achieved together. And obviously, working in an industry like tech, that affords a certain lifestyle. So lots of positives to take through it. And I think in many ways that sort of shaped me into the adult, into the human I am today. There's a flip side to that though. There's an intensity in tech sales that is like nothing else I've ever experienced. I would say particularly in recent years, and I've done a mix of roles across sort of corporate vendors and startup, scale-up type businesses. So the demands are quite different. In a startup, obviously it's all hands to the pump, and sometimes you suffer from a depth of resources that you do get in a corporate environment. But obviously in a startup, you get the freedom and the excitement of breaking new boundaries and doing things for the first time, whereas in corporate it can be a little bit more, the boundaries are a little bit more defined, right? So, but what I observed in the last few years, particularly in organisations that I worked in and my peers in the industry, is just this increased level of expectation and pressure around results. I would say sometimes at the expense of the employees, at the expense of the people, and just this pivot to almost to like results at all costs. So what that can mean for sort of conscientious performers that are used to delivering results, when the bar keeps getting higher and higher and maybe you have a quarter or two where you miss, there's a sense of not feeling good enough, right? And that can really send you doing a bit of soul searching internally. So I think what I would say is the organisations that are focused on their people and focus on sustainability are on the increase, but are still sort of drowned out by the organisations that are focused primarily on results, and almost like this badge of honour around endurance. And I know you and I have sort of spoken about that previously, right? It's just the more meetings you can take, the more sales you can do, the more things you can put on your plate. There's almost a reward for that, particularly in the corporate environment. And my personal view is that's just not sustainable. Yeah. The workplace has evolved at a rate far quicker than we have as human beings, and there's a disconnect, there's a gap there, and that's really the space that I sit in with the coaching that I do. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think I remember there are corporate terms that I remember and use sometimes, but managing the optics was a term.
It's a big part of the role, right?
Right. It's so you've not only are you trying to do a good job in a sales role because that's how you're measured and that's how you're rewarded, but you've also got to manage other people's expectations. So there's the doing the job, and then there is the showing that you're doing the job as well. And I think I always found that those two aspects of the job weren't necessarily always aligned. And then you add on the fact that this is a highly competitive environment. Yeah. I use the analogy, it's like a Premier League team. Building a great sales team, it's like you got to find the right players. And you go for the best players. Sometimes the best players aren't available. They're playing for another team. And you either try and get them to come across, or you get the next player. And I think that type of ethos and mentality, I certainly experienced that, and my experience in that career, which was super rewarding, and I'm super grateful for it. But that was certainly my experience. It was hot. It was hot in the kitchen.
Yeah, for sure.
So when people like yourself who are arguably at the height of their powers, 20 years of selling, managing sales teams. You've accumulated all this experience and all this know-how and knowledge, choose to take a different direction. People like me pause and go,
Yeah, right.
why?
Yeah.
What is happening in that person's life to incentivize them or drive them to take a completely different direction?
Sure.
A completely different direction and bet on themselves.
Yeah.
And I really admire that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I see it as evolution, almost as a, to the point I made a moment ago, just really leveraging everything I've learned and gained over the last 24 years to take forward into the next chapter of my life. And what I would say is it's been a very conscious evaluation from me, a very considered decision that I made, and there's a few factors involved in that we can talk through. But it was something that built up over, I would say, over a couple of years. I knew on the inside that what I was doing wasn't serving me anymore, and I didn't really have that sense of purpose in as much as I enjoyed aspects of my role, and I always found the coaching side of things very fulfilling and leading teams. I just knew that there was something missing, and that the next chapter looked a little bit different for me. So I chose to embark on some self-development. Sort of press pause, embark on some self-development work, and that's really where this sort of unfolding's happened, and has given me the clarity I needed to make the change that I was looking for.
What were the circumstances it sounds like you were thinking about making a change for a while. Certainly you were feeling some level of misalignment.
Sure.
Maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's how it came across to me. Were there specific circumstances that led to you choosing to take a career break, or was that just an accumulation of stuff that had just led you to just needing to take a break?
Yeah. I think there was. I knew for a long time there that something wasn't right, and it became clearer after the time. But what I did observe, sort of while I was in the roles, was there was a feeling that something was missing, or a feeling of being drained and depleted, and it kept reappearing, like there was a pattern to it. So what I'd done through my career, when that got too overwhelming, I would push for another role at that organisation, or I would change employer. I would seek something new and fresh to see if that feeling went away, and every time it did for a while, but then it would resurface. So I guess taking a step back from that and just seeing the pattern, what I wanted to do was just go and explore that a little bit more to understand what was behind it, and what I could do to make some changes. And stepping out of the environment and doing the self-development work, what became crystal clear to me was that the pressure that I was feeling wasn't really coming from the role. It was the pressure that I was putting on myself in the way that I measured success, in the way that I was thinking, in the way that I was showing up for myself. I put so much of that pressure on me, and it was only breathing and sort of taking a pause and stepping out, and then going through and finding some models that almost gave me a language and structure around what I was experiencing. That then things became clear. The penny dropped. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
The change starts with me.
Yeah, okay. So you take a career break.
Yeah.
You know something doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Maybe at the time you can't necessarily articulate it in the way that you can now.
Sure.
What does those first couple of months look like? How do you feel? Are you looking for structure? Are you missing structure, or are you just sort of basking in the glory of not having to jump on a call at 9 o'clock in the morning?
I would say it was mixed. Being in pretty demanding leadership roles for a number of years there, you're used to people needing you, people calling you, people wanting help with things. So there was a period there where I had to adjust to, actually, my phone's not ringing like it was. There's no one asking me questions. There's no one needing me to support me in a certain area. So there was definitely a reality around that, and that took a while to adjust. I was very intentional with how I spent those first couple of months, making sure that I went back to the UK to see my folks, and keeping myself busy with things that were important to me, and that were far removed from the day-to-day that I'd been living for the last 20 plus years. So. And I think that helped me settle in. But there was definitely a sort of a realization point there as I started doing the self-development work. Is that as the learnings came through, it was okay. Well, there's actually a fair bit of time that I need, and that I need and want to want to put into me first before I really pursue the next thing, right? So I think the themes were building, but the clarity came through the self-work.
Yeah. There are lots of modalities to do self-development.
Yeah.
Lots of modalities. What was it about NLP? How did you find that? How did you bump into it? And what is it?
It was a chance conversation that I had with a guy that I used to work with years and years ago who'd been on a not too dissimilar path, and he went and studied NLP and became certified in it, and it had helped sort of turn his life around. He had a very different set of circumstances, but just finding a model that helped bring meaning to what he was feeling. I sort of shared my experience with him. He said, look, just look it up. And I did. And I found a company down in Melbourne that was offering the course. So I signed up, not really knowing what I was getting into. And like, if I'm honest, I had mixed views at the time, because some people think it can be a little bit woohoo. And I'm a very practical guy. So I wanted to make sure that what I was investing in time in gave me the insights, but also the tool set that I could apply. And so I was pleasantly surprised as I worked my way through the NLP experience that, this is actually a real practical model that not only supports the self-work, but that then sort of spruiked the thoughts around, okay, how could I then use this in coaching? Because I think for many, many years, I always had a view that I would move into coaching or maybe consulting, sort of bringing my expertise across those years into helping individuals. And I'd always had a passion for coaching individuals or sort of team-based coaching in the roles. So as I found these models and as I started to notice improvements myself, I thought, actually, there's something in this. Another model that I studied was the PR6 resilience model. And that's a science-backed model that essentially brings structure and language around what resilience is. And the first thing it taught me is that resilience is a skill set. It's not a personality trait. So there's actually a model that measures 6 domains, and I use this with my coaching clients because what it does is it says, if the definition of resilience is advancing despite adversity, and we accept that life is always going to throw curveballs at us, then what are we doing to build up our skill set so that we are ready when that adversity hits? And how do we navigate that and manage the pressures? And there's a great model there with a set of tools that's been very, very, very beneficial for me, but also is working well for clients. So.
What is NLP? I know what it is, but I don't know.
That was a long way to answer your question, right? So, NLP, neuro-linguistic program. So, at its core, it's a communication model that gives people a sense of choice back. So, between a stimulus and a response, there's a space, and in that space, there's a choice, and that choice creates growth and freedom, which is obviously the Viktor Frankl saying. Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to explain it is reality is unfolding around us all day, every day. And your experience of reality is different to my experience. And that experience is built upon a lot of things that are formed in our childhood years that we carry through life. So our default thinking structures, our memories, our beliefs, our values, etc., our century style. So as we're taking in information, all of this sort of is happening subconsciously in the background. And then as we sort of chunk that down to make sense of that stimulus, what we're then really left with is our view of reality, right? So it's almost like a movie that plays in your mind, and that movie will then generate an emotion. You'll have an emotional response to that, and then that in turn then sort of feeds into the physiology, into the behavior, into the communication, right? So what NLP teaches you is that there is choice, and that space creates the choice for you to respond more consciously and more differently, right? And that has been really, really enlightening for me, because I think why it's important is communication can and does break down because you assume that I see things the same way as you and vice versa. And that's simply not true. People have their own unique view of reality. And what it does is it just gives you a tool set and an understanding around if I just pause and breathe, and then I'm more conscious how I want to respond in a certain situation, knowing how I typically respond because I've got more clarity around what's inherent to me, then it just gives me a far more intentional way to show up for myself, right? So, so it's been fascinating. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of layers to it. There's lots of different tools that surround that, but fundamentally, that's what NLP is there to do.
Yeah. I remember catching up with you in Surrey Hills for dinner. Yeah, and we spoke about this, and you were kind of midway through the course
And
and the study. And like I said, I could discern a change within you then. Like we hadn't seen each other for a little while. And I thought there's something quite different about this guy now. What change did you notice when you started actually applying the principles of NLP to your own life? What did you start to notice about yourself?
Yeah, I just caught the autopilot bit more often, Luke. So my autopilot would kick in, and I would subconsciously just respond or communicate, behave a certain way. And as I learned and applied the model, because the work needs to be done. It's one thing learning the tool, but you've got to apply it to get the benefit. It was just catching myself in certain moments, whether that be a parenting context or a work context, just going, hey, if I just press pause for a moment, right? Do I want the autopilot to keep playing that same record, or am I going to choose to show up a little bit differently? And it's highly practical, but it's a very powerful tool, right? And just it's clarity before change, right? So when you get the clarity around what's inherent to you in terms of the things that you bought from childhood, because many people run old versions of software. Like your software is formed through most of your thinking development is sort of 0 to 7 years, and sure, it evolves and can change over time, but unless you're consciously paying attention to that and learning how to reframe certain things, then you just keep running the same old record, right? And that's what I learned about myself. That is what I was doing. The stories that I was telling myself around how I was. You talked about my drive, and just so much of that was what I was telling myself.
Programmed.
Right? Yeah, it was programmed. If I wasn't doing the big hours, if I wasn't the guy that was always doing that extra bit, if I wasn't creating new ideas, if I wasn't being the best I could possibly be, then I was failing.
Yeah.
But there's a tax to that. There's a depletion of energy around that.
Yeah. I remember, I can't remember how old I was. It was certainly maybe sort of mid to late 40s when I first started to realize I could start to spot patterns in my own behavior,
right,
and how I'd respond to things.
Sure.
And it was like, oh my God, you mean to say that this is me? I'm doing all this? I'm inviting these circumstances and these responses and these people and relationships into my life.
Yeah.
And it was at the same time, it was like lifting a weight off me, but it was also the flip side of that was, I have a personal responsibility to start to unpick some of this stuff and really understand why I do and say and behave the way I do, and really embrace and understand that pretty much everything I've done throughout my whole adult life was based on a set of principles and standards and programs that I inherited, from parents, from family, from friends, from school, from, all of the conditioning, And if you're able to actually take the time to sit with a lot of the decisions you make and the behaviors and be aware, I think awareness was a big thing for me.
Sure.
You can start to say, oh, wow, this is not that person's fault. And the other thing that really helped me was understanding that people are just operating from the realm of their own awareness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're just operating off whatever they've learned, whatever they've come into contact with. And even scripture captures that. Jesus said, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of depth to that concept. At what point in that NLP journey, in that career break period, did you start to think, oh, I can actually help people with this?
Yeah, I would say fairly early on. Before I'd committed to the NLP course, I'd had the conversation with the provider, with the course provider. I knew that they had a continuation pathway into what they called integral coaching, and so that was there from the outset. But I was also very open-minded around where the NLP experience could have taken me. And I think as I worked through that and I felt the impact that it was having on me, I think particularly, Luke, because I saw so many people like me in tech, and they may have had their own version of that truth, but it was they're burnt out.
Yeah.
They're feeling overwhelmed, and there's a couple of specific sort of types or scenarios there that we can talk to, but when you've been doing those kind of roles for a long time and it's one quarter after the other, to your point, there's a condition in there. what can look successful and in a good place externally, for many people, there's a struggle on the inside, right? So, and I engage with a lot of people, both close to me, but also peers across the industry that had been doing this for years and were burning out, right? So I thought, if I can help myself, then and couple that with the passion for coaching, there's definitely a demand here for it. So why not take that forward?
Yeah. Burnout's one of those words, right? It can mean different things to different people. In your experience as a coach now, and having dealt with people and coached people and made observations of individuals that are perhaps coming into your orbit or have always been in your orbit, but are of that industry and still are. How does burnout present itself? When someone's done 96 quarters, what can that look like? What did it look like for you?
I mean, look, it does mean different things for different people, but typically the four main areas are exhaustion, so physical and then sort of cognitive strain, emotional strain, and then just this sense of withdrawal or disengagement. That was certainly true for me. The way I experienced it physically was brain fog. I would have prolonged periods of brain fog for unknown reasons at the time that have now become clear to me since. And that was just what was manifesting for me and how my body was responding to it. I was definitely becoming more cynical than is natural for me. And I did find myself withdrawing from certain relationships because you almost go into this self-protection mode. You're just trying to get through the day, right? You're trying to get through the week. And then what would present for me is just, as I open my eyes on a Sunday morning, just this instant kind of mood change, right?
Yeah.
Not because of where I was going to work or who I was going to work with. I just wasn't happy in myself, right? So, and I didn't want to be doing that anymore, but I wasn't clear on what I wanted it to be. So, so that's how burnout showed up for me. But I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, the data would say that 2/3 of people report symptoms of burnout. That's projected to grow to 80% plus in the coming years. And tech is one of the industries where burnout is most common. Professional services and legal and education. But and really, the modern definition of burnout is not just about the work context; it's around work and life, right? So it's cross-contextual. You think that reality for many people is dual income households. Maybe they're trying to put the kids through paid education. Maybe they've got big financial commitments. So when you give everything you can to your career and you're conscious of how you show up for your family, like what's left at the end in the fuel tank for yourself? For many people, there's not a lot left. And then so if you just continue that pattern and you keep pushing through, and certainly I have been of the mindset of the only way to deal with this is just to get your head down and keep going. Something gives, your health gives, maybe a relationship breaks down, you don't know yourself. There's bigger and longer term consequences if you ignore the symptoms.
Yeah, big time. One thing that interests me is the rise of coaching.
Sure.
And I do find myself asking the question, why? Why everywhere I look online, there's a coach, And I think I have, at times in my life, I think I've probably been a little bit cynical in terms of coaching, but there seems to be something happening. I think coaching is it's a lagging indicator of, it's a response to something else that's going on, right? And I think that thing that's going on is exactly what you're talking about, is that people, either because of their own programming or the organisation expectations and associated metrics and measurements, they are finding themselves more and more time poor, their relationships are suffering, and there is a dissonance within them they can't quite describe, but there is a friction within them. And it's interesting to me that whilst there isn't a lot of, certainly based on my network and the people that I talk to, I don't think there are that many people talking about, from a lived experience point of view, about how that feels and presents itself. But certainly what I've noticed is that there are way more coaches around, way more coaches that are engaged, that are being booked, that are making money. And like I said to you, I think that's a lagging indicator of something that is quite manifest. What's been your experience? I mean, what's your? I mean, clearly you're a coach. Clearly you see an opportunity to help people. But what do you think's going on in the workplace at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think it is the workplace, but for me, it's cross contextual. It's modern life. Like modern life can be complex, right? It's demanding, and to the point I made earlier around commitments to career and family and self. It's the world around us has evolved far quicker than we have as humans, and I think that gap is just becoming more and more obvious. What I would say in addition to your comment there is I think there's a lot less stigma around coaching now. I think people, I mean, just the fact we're having this conversation, right? I think there's a lot more openness to coaching, and the way I view it is it's akin to working with a PT. So, for many years now, we've all been very comfortable talking about and investing in personal trainers and yoga memberships and gym memberships, etc., because we put priority around our physical health. I think there's just a lot more awareness and acceptance now around the importance of mental health or mental wellness. So it's around, and obviously the mind and body are so closely interlinked, right? So if you're not taking care of your brain, and it does a pretty important job for us all day, every day, right? So why wouldn't we create space in our days to actually give a bit of self-care around that? So I think there's a lot less stigma, and actually, what I would say is I've observed a positive trend on social media around that. I think there's a lot more people out there promoting positive content. There's a lot of people openly talking around the benefits of mental wellness and coaching and therapy, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if you look at the stats, the global coaching market is growing double digit from a KGAR perspective. More and more organisations are taking a very structured approach to how they help their workforces build resilience, and that's one of the reasons that I launched my coaching business, and I call it Thrive Again Coaching, and that's got a lot of meaning for me, Luke, because the people that I work with, for most of them, they've been in a better place than we're right now, and my role is to guide them to get back on track and to find a more sort of intentional way of being again. So it's the market's growing, the demand's there. I think the stigma is far less, and what you're seeing is in markets like Australia, they're playing catch up, as we often do. The US have been very, very comfortable talking about the importance of having coaches and the value of working with coaches for a number of years now, and Australia is playing catch up there, right? So. And then obviously go back to our previous point, just around the number of people that are needing help, right? Whatever that looks like, whether that's burnout, a relationship issue, or just a sense of identity. There are many different situations that present themselves in a coaching context, but the underlying thing there is people are more accepting around the help now. Yeah.
I used to think that coaching was really, because in my career I saw execs higher up the food chain than me. And they would have professional coaches,
Sure.
CEOs, MDs,
Sure.
VPs. A lot of these individuals had coaches. And I suspect what is happening is that there's recognition by individuals inside those types of companies further down the food chain. Maybe they're aspiring to evolve as individual contributors, they're aspiring to evolve as leaders, and they're recognizing, in order for me to actually take that next step and really fulfill what I think my gifts and my talents are, maybe I need some help here, So I do think that this is, I was going to say the dawn of, but certainly I think when the hockey stick of coaching adoption seems to be going in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something that you're seeing?
Yeah, the trends would absolutely say that. And look, whether that's an individual paying for it out of their own pocket, maybe they're feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, or maybe they're working towards a career transition, or they could be a leader in a role and they're dealing with a lot of complexity and demands, and they need some help around how they manage themselves in that situation. Or whether it's the actual organisation themselves that want to support their people and recognise that the demands that they're putting on them, it's really around prioritizing that sustainability over endurance, as we spoke about. And I think you're seeing a lot more sort of forward-thinking organisations getting this now, and then bringing structured programs into the workplace. So in my mind, that's very much the look and feel of the modern workplace, is where they actually have this as a program. Yeah.
Are you seeing that though? Is it still more individuals looking for individual coaching, or are you now starting to see organisations say, you know what, we're actually going to find some budget for this, and we're going to put some people through some coaching?
I would say 60-70% individual. The rest is coming from company, but definitely the number of companies expressing interest in this now is on the rise. And I think, to your point, it's just as the awareness and the acceptance around this being, it's a part of the performance toolkit at the end of the day, right? So in the same way that organisations put on wellness days and yoga classes and gym memberships, etc. I mean, why not invest into your people in terms of their mindset and professional coaching?
Yeah. I'm interested to get your view on coaching as it applies to EQ.
Right.
Particularly when it comes to leadership. Because I think, I really like that analogy you use. You know, if you've got a personal trainer in the gym to help you develop your body, why wouldn't you get someone to help you not develop your mind, but give you the tools whereby you can identify thinking patterns that serve you and those that don't,
Sure.
and make decisions based on that understanding. That, to me, when I think about it in terms of a coach helping me develop that aspect of my life, I think that is a no-brainer. You know, why?
You'd think so.
Why you would think so, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I think that's so important is because if I think about the leaders that I have really admired and worked for and learnt from, almost to a person, what they've shared in common is a level of emotional maturity.
Yeah.
And their EQ has been off the charts.
Yeah.
And I think this is the area where someone can really benefit from coaching. Where do you see yourself helping individuals that find themselves in a position where they're suffering from burnout? Maybe they're at a point in their careers where they just haven't been able to make that next step. Where do those? Give me a sense as to where those conversations start and maybe finish.
Yeah, right. I mean, first of all, I agree with you. I think emotional intelligence is a
big
key
one,
component
right?
of any successful leader. And if I think about the great ones that I've worked with, they all had a strong sense of EQ, and they cared. And sometimes just knowing that they care and seeing that they care is the spring that you need in your step that day, right?
Yeah.
So they've got your back. And sure, they'll push for results and they can be demanding and they're dealing with pressures from up above, but just being compassionate in the way that they lead is a big thing, right? Is a big thing, and certainly that's the leaders that I connected with most, and I'm very fortunate that that's generally the profile that I worked with. In my experience, people with less emotional intelligence often just don't know, Luke, right? So when you actually bring that to their attention through some examples or through some 360 feedback or whatever it may be, there can be a light bulb moment for a lot of people, right? Because how they're intending to communicate, how they're intending to get their message across, and it can be quite different to the impact that it has on the person receiving the message, right? And you know, one of the presuppositions in NLP is like the meaning of communication is the response that you get, right? So it's how that message is received and how that message is understood that sort of defines how effective that communication was. So I think if you come from a strong place of self-awareness and EQ and just thinking about how your messaging and your actions land with people around you, like that's a big thing.
Yeah. I think about the workplace of the future a lot. And I imagine a world where, I mean, I don't know what AI will do to sales, right? I think there are some industries where AI is clearly going to...
And is having an impact already.
And is already having impact, right? At this point in time, I'm not smart enough to understand or be able to form an opinion as to whether AI is going to take away sales roles, like frontline sales roles, enterprise sales roles. I don't know. But I suspect that what might happen in the future is that the impact of AI on the workforce is such that those extraneous job roles are filled with, or individuals that are doing functional job roles. Those roles are replaced by artificial intelligence. And what we're left with is a workforce full of highly skilled, highly specialized individuals that have skill sets that can't be immediately replaced by AI, right? And I think about them and their worth and the value of the service or the skill set they have, and how corporations might solicit their services, might attract them.
Right.
And what those individuals might be looking for. And I kind of look at some of the stuff that's going on in tech at the moment, and you kind of hear about Zuckerberg offering AI scientists and engineers $100 million. And a lot of these individuals are saying no. They're saying no to these. Clearly I'm talking about, a tiny, tiny fraction of people that are very specialist in their skill sets. But I think, to me, that indicates that there'll be a point in time where these individuals, they're not necessarily motivated by the number anymore. They're more motivated by the environment and the culture and the people that are leading that organization and the way they lead, and the leadership styles. So I kind of think that it's almost this perfect storm that we're this is my theory, of course, that we're kind of sailing into,
right,
where leading with integrity and compassion and empathy is going to be a competitive advantage. There's a great, very famous economist named Minouche Shafik, and one of my friends introduced me to this lady, and she's best known for the following statement. She said, in the past, jobs were about muscle. Now they're about intelligence, but in the future, they'll be about heart. That's a world-leading economist saying that, And I hear that and go, ooh. Everybody, pay attention to that, because that, to me, that's a leading indicator in terms of where work and workforce and the workplace is going. So that's why I think, I kind of describe this as a bit of a perfect storm.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the tricky part for an organisation is getting the balance right around that as well. I've worked in organisations where absolutely the priority was the people and the well-being, etc.
Yeah.
But the focus and the discipline around delivering results was a hindrance, right? So there's a balance that needs to come in. I think the opposite is also true. There can be such a focus and discipline around results that whilst companies may spruik their values around their employees and caring for people, how they actually
100%.
How they actually live that and express that is quite different.
Yeah, 100%. This is no diss on any company I've ever worked for, but the values that I've seen presented in the slideware, more often than not, have never aligned with the actions of the executive team.
Yeah.
And I always, I always felt a great deal of friction over that. So again, I suspect that we're moving into an era where what a company says it stands for needs to be embodied.
Yeah. What I would say though, Luke, is my personal view is I don't think the modern workplace is broken. I think it's evolved and changed at a rapid rate, and the gap, as I've said, between that and human development is significant. But really, in my mind, it's the mental models that need updating. Like, how do we as individuals and how do corporations think about their people and help them update their thinking and behavioural patterns so they can actually be sustainable in the modern workplace, right? Knowing that endurance isn't a badge of honour. We shouldn't be rewarding people that just push through and do more and get there through grit and determination, right? Because that's what ends up burning people out, right? That's what ends up leading people to choose a new employer at some point.
Yeah.
So it's recognising that if the modern workplace operates a certain way, how do we invest in our people to help them navigate those environments and make sure that when they leave work at a suitable time, that they've still got some gas in the tank for themselves and their family, right? I think that's the course correction in my mind that really needs to happen.
Yeah. And you made a really good point earlier. You said oftentimes that desire, that work ethic, that maniacal work ethic is not an edict from the company. It's the individual's programming.
Sure.
Right? It's the way they associated their value.
It's how they define success.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was absolutely true for me for a number of years there. Yeah.
How do you define success now as a coach?
I would say, to the name of the podcast, like the comeback for me has not been about walking away from tech. It's learning how to be successful and content without sacrificing myself in the process. So I think just being a lot more deliberate around how I apply my ambition. I'm still a very ambitious person, and I imagine I always will be. But it's how do I just direct that more intentionally? How do I direct it in a way that is more is going to last for the mid to long term, right? Rather than these sort of short bursts that I experienced before, where I'd be good for a while and then I would just tank again, right? So they're the learnings that I've picked up along the way, and that really sort of forms the foundation of the work that I do with my clients. And I think just that, the value of the lived experience and just sitting alongside them and guiding them through a process, knowing largely what they're experiencing, because I've been there, I've felt it, and it's a place that I intentionally won't return to. So.
Yeah. What is it? I mean, there might be someone listening to this thinking, "Shit, I'm suffering from burnout.
Right.
I need to speak to someone." What does that process look like? What does the engagement process look like?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that I work with clients. So most clients come on through a structured program. So they'll come on for a minimum of 3 months, and through that we do obviously a very in-depth discovery around their outcomes that they're looking for. Some people it's about outcomes and goals. For others it's more around just a renewed sense of direction or trajectory. So we get very, very clear on shaping that and defining that early on. And then we go into a fortnightly rhythm from there. What we do quite early on in the process is we run a cognitive assessment as well, so to understand the thinking patterns that are guiding a lot of the decisions and behaviours. And then we get very, very clear on in what context does that still serve them, and where might they choose a little bit differently. And then we just get into applying the theory and doing the work and the practice. And then what I would also say is,
so it's a curriculum. Sorry to cut you off.
It's a defined program that we set very deliberate direction or outcomes together, and we check in on the progress there. And then what I typically see is people come to the end of that program. For some of them, that's enough, and off they go. They've got what they needed from the experience, and then other people move to the second model, which is more of a month-to-month subscription. So that's more just knowing that the support is there, and without really being having the need for the defined structured program. Yeah. Interestingly, though, what I see is there's an offering around support in between sessions as well, because life throws curveballs when you're least expecting it. And it might not wait around to the next scheduled appointment in 2 weeks,
That's right?
So, something's tripped you up at work or at home, and, you need a little bit of support. So just that sort of on-demand access in between it's been interesting to see how much people tap into that.
Well, in your experience, what are the types of triggers that get people reaching for the phone to call you or text you, or
someone says something that they spiral? So maybe a comment's made at work that the person that said it's probably not thought about it since, right? But because for some people they spend so much time in their own heads, the inner critic is very strong. So if someone says something that they have a reaction to, that can send them spiraling. So obviously using the tools to recognise that and try and take control of that a little bit sooner. So that's one of the more common things that I get calls about, and also just doubting themselves, right? So can I, is this gonna work? Am I gonna get myself back on track? And I had a strong, I've kind of backed off on on the discipline of it. I haven't put the tools into practice for the last few weeks, and I'm feeling not great about myself again. So we just course correct and talk it through. And really, my role in those conversations is just to guide them to the answers that they already know on the inside anyway, right? It's just to surface that stuff. So
Yeah. We're all works in progress.
sure.
How do you continue your own self-development, your own journey of meeting yourself and understanding your patterns and behaviors? And because what my experience has been, it's one thing conceptually understanding why you do things. It's a completely different thing correcting that, like applying practices to change that. How do you do that whilst you're, because you've really got two jobs: is to coach yourself, right, first and foremost, and then coach others. How do you find, how do you balance, I guess is what I'm asking, how do you balance the responsibility of being your own coach and coaching others?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said earlier on, just being very deliberate around how I structure my time. I read self-development books. I refresh on course content. I'm because I'm such a practical thinker and learner. Sometimes it's just a case of getting the manuals out again and just checking in with myself around how I'm going with that stuff. And obviously, what I would say, Luke, is the more you do these kind of things, the more they become ingrained and the more natural those responses and those choices then become. So, but yeah, I'm a big believer in that the work doesn't stop, right? That the self work doesn't stop. And obviously, I've been doing this for a fair while now, and I've seen the benefits that it's brought to me, and I see the benefits that it brings to clients. But I think you got to have a learning mindset.
Yeah. How do you feel about service? I mean, one of the things that I have found in my own life is, I was in therapy for a couple of years, and unlike your coaching, talk therapy, depending on what your issues are, can be fairly open-ended, And so I saw a therapist for probably almost 2 years, and it was interesting because there was a thought that I had. I thought, at what point does she know that I'm done,
that you're ready,
that this is finished?
Yeah.
And that was always a question for me. But ironically, in our last ever session, I rocked up to a therapy session with Rose, who was wonderful, ready to tell her that I think that I was ready to, live in the world without her. And she said it before me. She said, I think we're done. And it was almost this knowing, like both of us looked at each other and we thought, this is finished now, How much of a thrill do you get when you can see that you've helped someone?
Yeah.
That must be rewarding, right?
It's really rewarding. I mean, that's the reason that I do the work, right? It's got a lot of meaning to it and a lot of personal satisfaction when I know that someone's come to me in not such a great place, and through the work we've done together, they get back on track. So it's I would say for some people, you pick that fairly early on. They come with a strong sort of sense of self-awareness and almost an understanding around the things that they need to fix. They just want someone to be accountable with, to have someone hold them accountable to getting that done. For other people, it's it can take a fair bit longer. But I think the nature of the conversation changes. There's a lot more clarity and confidence that comes through in the conversation that would suggest that they're ready to step out. But knowing that the coaching is something that they can come back to, and life might present a situation down the track, but it's always a resource that's in their toolkit that they can tap into when they need to. Certainly from my own perspective, it's something that I take forward on my own, knowing that resources are there should I need them.
Yeah. I remember when I made the decision to start this podcast, I had so many fears,
right,
so many doubts. And to be honest with you, there is still some fear. I don't think there's any doubt anymore. There's still some fear, and that's a relationship that I continue to work with and sit with, and try and connect with. But I do recall that, early on in this process for me, because I didn't know what I was doing, I was scared. I was scared of, the questions that came up for me were, can I do this? Is anyone going to be interested? What will people think? If it doesn't work, what do I do?
Yeah.
Did you have any of that? Have you had any of that through this process of, in many ways, I think it's the bravest thing that anyone can do. And that's why we're so keen to have you on. And I think I said this to you in a note. It's the bravest thing for someone to leave the safety of a known career where they've got a reputation and capability and go all in on a different path. But really what they're doing is they're going all in on themselves. You know, fuck, I respect that. And I want to be around that. I want to be near those people, you
Thanks.
know.
Yeah.
I really do. So I mean, hat tip to you. But how have you dealt with the doubt and the fears and the anxieties? What will people think? How will people respond? Will I get any clients? Has that been difficult for you?
Well, let me assure you that they still pop up from time to time. It's I would say a healthy level of fears, and obviously an anticipation around the career change, but also the importance of the work that I'm doing. I want to be the best coach I can. I want to help people get back on track. That's the reason that I made this change. So I think because I spent so long making the decision to leave the tech role, created the space to go and do the self-development, to then get clear on the changes that I need to make, and then how could I couple those sort of new learnings and that tool set with the lived experience through tech. Reconnecting with my network and really offering those new services to them. So I would say a healthy level of fear, and as with anyone setting up their own business as well, right? Like there's a reality around that, because everything kind of comes back to you, right? So I've only ever been employed through my career. I've only ever worked for organisations. So this is the first role that I've done where it's actually all about Gav and the business that he's building, right? So healthy level of nerves, but also a massive amount of excitement. So.
I have found that the more often I've done this, the more episodes I record, the more conversations I have, the more comfortable I feel. Which I know that's an obvious thing to say. But I have found that whenever I get in my head about this and how it's being received, I just think to myself, go and record another conversation. You know, I think for me, action is the antidote, because the action removes the possibility of rumination.
Building up that familiarity and the act of doing is where the muscle. The muscle builds, right? So you do enough podcasts, and all of a sudden it becomes quite natural to you, right? So and that's the same in coaching conversations as well. But what I would say is sometimes the stories that we tell ourselves when we get in our own head, they're not the most resourceful, are they? So just catching that and actually reframing that, and it's okay to be having a little bit of anxiety and a little bit of fear, as long as it's applied in a resourceful way, right? So if it's keeping you on your toes and making sure that you do your prep and your research, then that's a great thing. But if it's kind of paralysing you, then it's not.
Do you find yourself wanting to coach your friends and family?
I remember when I did the first courses, that was something they spoke to us about, right? So because it's about asking for permission. Obviously, when someone's coming to you as a coaching client, they're seeking your services. But when you're in a context of talking to a friend and family member, you've got to be careful not to cross that line. And that's not always easy, because you come from a good place. You want to offer the help, and you can see something that maybe where you might be able to support them. But getting their permission is the number one rule. I have a daughter who keeps me very honest about that stuff. So.
Yeah, beautiful. Gav, we're at the end of the conversation. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is worth talking about?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, Luke. It's been a real enjoyable conversation from my perspective, and hopefully what I've been able to share is just how those learnings from those 20 plus years in tech and sort of coupling that with the self-work I've done, how that's just given me this renewed sense of direction and this motivation to go and help some other people, right? So and the more people that I help get back on track, the more and more connection I build to what I'm doing. So.
Yeah. Like I said, mate, I'm in awe of what you're doing, what you've done. I'm a big advocate of people taking bets on themselves. In fact, part of the reason for this podcast is to present people with the evidence. Show people other people.
It can be done.
It can be done.
Yeah.
You can overcome this stuff. You can take a right angle turn, and that can work out. So thank you for the examples that you're providing, other people. And you mentioned a word a little earlier that I didn't jump on at the time, but I will, in conclusion, talk about now. And you used the word intention. And I think my perspective is if you come to your work with the right intention, and when it comes to coaching or this podcast, the intention, I think, is to be of service and to help others. You cannot do anything but succeed. You cannot do anything but help others. And I know that exists within you. And so I wish you the best.
Thanks.
How do people get in contact with you?
Through LinkedIn, Thrive Again Coaching, or through the Insta and Facebook pages as well. Or if we're old school, just reach out at gavin@thriveagaincoaching.com. So there's many different ways. So yeah, look forward to hearing from anyone that's interested.
Wonderful. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Cool, and good on you, Luke, for what you're doing as well, the service that you're bringing through these conversations. So that's also a very brave move that you made. So good on you for enabling this kind of discussion.
Thank you, Brian.